it's Melissa from Melissa's Creations, and today we're going to make a version of this beautiful card. Now, this card was made using Graceful Garden, but we are actually going to switch it up a little and use a different stamp set. I really love the technique on this card. It's a half colored card where you can get 2 cards out of one project. So we're taking basically the top half and the bottom half of a piece of Whisper White paper, coloring it in, stamping it, and then we're going to use our Stamp-A-Majig to position our other stamps on our solid cardstock base. I can't wait to show you how I made this project. Let's get started. So since we can get 2 cards out of this project, I have 2 card bases. They're both the same size. This is 5.5 by 8.5, scored in the middle at 4.25. This is using Rich Razzleberry. And then I have 1 piece of Whisper White cardstock. This is the same size as a regular card front. So again, that is 4.25 by 5.5. I have also cut 2 strips of basic black cardstock. These measure 1/2 inch by 5.5. We are going to start with the stamping on our project. I'm going to bring in my foam piercing mat with the grid paper so that I can kind of stamp off the edge of my project. And I have my archival Stampin' pad in basic black. Now we will be coloring in these images, so if you'd rather use your Memento, depending on what coloring apparatus you are using, that's perfectly fine. The stamp set we're using today is, of course, Petal palette. This is one of my absolute favorites in the Kre8tions catalog that just launched this month. I love these so much, so versatile, so beautiful. That is what we are going to be using on this card today. So I've mounted up that beautiful large floral piece, and we're going to stamp that a couple of times on our cardstock here. We do want to keep the images mostly on the lower portion of this cardstock, but it doesn't matter after that how you stamp or where you stamp. But I'm trying to keep most of this top portion free from images. So I'm just going to stamp this a couple of times. So I have one there, and we'll put one down here in this corner. All right, and then we'll bring in this fun little guy and put a few of him around. So I'll stamp one here and then rotate it a little bit, put one there. And then maybe one coming off of this side. And then I also have this mounted, so we'll do a few of him. We'll get one up here. And then maybe one more coming down this way. To color this in, I'm going to use a few different colors. For my greens, I am using some of our 2017-2019 in colors. We have our Lemon Lime Twist and our Tranquil Tide. And for our purples, I am using my Rich Razzleberry to match my card base, along with the Fresh Fig, also from the new in colors. So I'm starting with my darker color, and I'm just going to come in and kind of outline a few pieces, and then I will go back in with my Rich Razzleberry and color in the rest of the flower. All right, once you get that all colored in, we're going to bring in our Stampin' trimmer and we're going to cut off. I know it might hurt, but it is fine. It will be okay, I promise. We're going to cut off 1.5 inches from the bottom of where we colored. So that will give us our 2 halves to our card. And now we're going to use our Stamp-A-Majig to get our placement. So I have my imaging sheet here. I have my Stamp-A-Majig tool here. I'm going to butt up the imaging sheet into the corner of my Stamp-A-Majig. And then I'm going to ink up my stamp and stamp it onto the imaging sheet so I can get the placement. So in the corner, straight down, straight up. You don't have to get the entire thing, you just want a majority of the outline. And then I'm going to rotate it and do the same for my other stamps that I have on the Whisper White piece. All right, I'm going to use one of my card bases, and with the bottom half of my Whisper White piece that I used to color in, I'm going to adhere that flat down to the card. So I'm going to use my Fast Fuse for that. And we'll just get that right down there on the bottom. Line it up with all your edges. And if you have a little bit of overhang, don't worry, you can just trim it right off. Now, using that imaging sheet, we're going to find our placement on our card. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you have this card folded in half. So we'll just crease that score line. I am going to bring in my foam mat because it has some scratch paper on it I can stamp off on. So we're going to line up our stamped image on our imaging sheet with our stamp on our paper. I'm going to take a piece of washi tape and I'm just going to hold down the corner of my card to my work surface so the card doesn't slide around on me when I'm using my Stamp-A-Majig. I'm going to position my tool in the corner of that imaging sheet, ink up my stamp, and get it ready. And you want to make sure you pay attention to the direction. This part is super important. So I stamped it like this, and that's how I want to use it in my Stamp-A-Majig. So I have my Stamp-A-Majig in place. I'm going to remove my imaging sheet. I'm going to bring in a piece of scratch paper or a sticky note, and you really want to make sure that you cover up your colored in piece so you don't mess that up. Now I'm going to put my image on my Stamp-A-Majig and stamp that down. Make sure I get nice contact on that cardstock. And then bring it up and you have a continuation of that image on your cardstock. Now don't worry if you have some separation and it doesn't quite meet, because that's what our piece of black cardstock is for. We're just going to mount that right on top of our card just like that. You won't even know. All right, we're going to come over to this flower now. So line that up. And you can see that there's just barely a tiny little bit there, and that's going to be covered up by our strip. So I'm not even going to worry about stamping that little tiny amount. I'm just going to leave that part alone. But I am going to stamp the rest of my page according to the part that I cut off. So I do know that at the top I have this little guy that connects to that guy, so I need to stamp him. So I'm going to bring back in my imaging sheet, and it's going to go right here. So I'm going to put my Stamp-A-Majig in this corner. and bring in that sticky note again to cover up the part you don't want stamped. Grab that stamp, ink it up. Make sure that it's going the right direction, and then put it in your Stamp-A-Majig, stamp it down and straight up. And then you're just going to continue that same process for the rest of the stamps on your piece. So this piece here, I don't have anything to line it up with, so I can kind of just use my own judgment and just kind of stamp that one however I want. So I know that it goes this way, and it's gonna go right about here. And then I did stamp the smaller piece off the edge up here, so we're gonna do that too. So this guy goes right about here. All right, now that we have that card done, we're going to do the same thing with our other card. All right, so now that we have that portion done, we're going to do some heat embossing directly onto our projects as well as onto our small black strips. So I have my embossing buddy, and the first thing I want to do is rub that along the part of my black strip that I am going to emboss. So I'm just kind of plopping it down and then rubbing it along. So we have that. Now I'm also going to rub that onto my projects. On this card, I think I'm gonna stamp that sentiment up in the right corner, and I think I'll stamp it in the same spot on this one. So I'm using the thank you sentiment from Petal palette. With my Versamark stamp pad, we're gonna stamp that down. And I'm just gonna stamp this one right here. And I'll stamp this one probably in the same place right here. So we're going to emboss that in silver. So I'm going to bring in my silver embossing powder and pour a little bit on there. And the other sentiment I'm using is For Everything. So we'll stamp that in our Versamark right onto our black strips. All right, and then we're going to use our white Stampin' Emboss powder to emboss that. And with our heat tool on high, we're going to emboss those. All right, I'm going to take that black strip and pop that up with some of my Stampin' Dimensionals, and I'm just going to put a few all the way along this strip. And there we go, creators. There is our project today. We got 2 cards out of 1 colored piece of cardstock, and then a couple of card bases and some strips of our basic black. I hope you enjoyed this project and this technique. If you did, please give the video a big thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button so you can be notified of future videos, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this card today. You can get all the supplies for these projects at melissaskreations.com. Just click on Shop Now. Your support continues allowing me doing what I love, which is bringing out videos for you to enjoy. You can also follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/mcreations and on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest with the handle @mcreations. Thank you so much for everything, and I hope to see you guys again real soon. Bye.